I landed a 500K a year job and thought my life was finally turning in the direction I had worked so hard for. But the moment my dad found out, he leaned across the kitchen table with my mom sitting quietly by his side and said, 50% goes to us, 30% goes to your brother, no excuses. At first I thought he was joking, maybe being dramatic in his usual way, but the cold seriousness in his voice told me he meant every word. I had just signed the offer letter with a global consulting firm in New York. After years of late nights, grad school debt, and networking, like my life depended on it, and instead of congratulations, what I got from my own family was an invoice disguised as tradition. My brother, 2 years younger than me, sat on the couch scrolling on his phone, not even pretending to look embarrassed. And when I glanced at him in shock, he shrugged like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's how family works, my dad added, his hand tapping the table like a gavel. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about helping them through a rough patch. It was about control, about making sure my success never fully belonged to me. And I remember thinking, if I give in now, I'll never be free. Not a single paycheck of mine will ever feel like mine again. I froze in that chair, staring at him, trying to process the absurdity of what he had just demanded. My whole childhood had been a slow conditioning for this exact moment, and I could see it now, like puzzle pieces clicking together. Growing up, everything was about appearances. My dad loved to parade me around at family gatherings as the smart one, the one who would make it big someday. But behind the pride, there was always this unspoken expectation that whatever I achieved, it wasn't for me, it was for the family name, for the family reputation, and apparently, for their bank account. I remember being 16 and winning a scholarship. He told everyone it was because of his guidance, his sacrifices, not my effort. When I worked 2 jobs through college, he framed it as proof that his parenting had made me resilient. And my brother, he was the golden boy who never had to lift a finger. Whenever he flunked a class or lost a job, Dad would look at me and say, "Your brother is just finding his way. You're strong enough to carry us until he does." That night in the kitchen, all of it came back. The years of being treated like the family's personal ATM in training. My mom avoided my eyes, stirring her tea over and over, though it had gone cold. And I realized she wasn't going to intervene. She never did. My brother smirked like he was already picturing himself driving a new car with my money. And in that silence, something hardened inside me. I thought about the debt I'd clawed my way out of, the rejection letters, the nights crying into my laptop, the mornings waking up with swollen eyes and forcing myself to push through. None of them had been there for that. None of them had earned a single cent of what I was now being offered. I had, and yet here they were, demanding slices of a pie they hadn't baked. My dad leaned back, satisfied with his decree, and said, "If you want to stay in this family, that's the deal." And that's when it hit me. He wasn't asking, he was threatening. It wasn't just about money, it was about control, about making sure I'd never truly belonged to myself. That was the moment I knew I had a choice to make, and it wouldn't just change my bank account, it would change my life. I sat there, staring at him, but inside my head was racing like a storm. I replayed every single sacrifice I had made to get to this point, the unpaid internships, where I lived off ramen noodles, the nights I studied until dawn for exams, while my brother was out partying, the job interviews I flew to on borrowed credit card money. I had poured myself into this future, building it brick by brick, alone. And now my own father thought he could just claim it as his, as if all my work had been for him. I remembered the way he used to sneer at me when I was in college, saying, "Don't waste your time on that nonsense degree. Just make money and send it home." I remembered the way he praised my brother when he dropped out of yet another job, telling him, "You'll find your path, don't worry." The double standard was always there, and now it had turned into a demand that I financially bind myself to their failures. My hands clenched in my lap so tightly that my nails dug into my skin because I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I knew that if I shouted, they'd twist it into, "You're ungrateful," or "You hate your family." Instead, I went quiet, and in that quiet, I started planning. I thought about my new salary, $500,000 a year. I had worked so hard to get here, and with careful saving, I could buy myself freedom. I could invest. I could build a future. That was mine, not chained to them. But if I handed over 80% of it like they demanded, I would be no better off than before. My dad's words kept echoing. "If you want to stay in this family, that's the deal." It was a threat, plain and simple. But something inside me whispered, what if I don't want to stay? What if I finally walk away? The idea terrified me. My entire life, every decision I made, every move, had been framed around keeping their approval, even when that approval came at the cost of my own happiness. But looking across the table at my father's stone-cold eyes, at my brother's smug grin, at my mother's silence, I realized the truth. This wasn't love. This was control dressed up as family. And once I saw it clearly, I couldn't unsee it. I knew if I agreed now, they would drain me forever. The raise, the promotions, the bonuses, they would already count it as theirs. And my brother, lazy and entitled, would have no reason to ever stand on his own feet if I kept feeding him. No, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding as I mapped out what I had to do next. I would protect my income, my future, and my independence. And for the first time in my life, I would put myself before them. The very next morning, I woke up with a kind of clarity I had never felt before. I brewed coffee in my tiny apartment kitchen, stared out the window at the city skyline, and repeated to myself, this money is mine. My life is mine. It wasn't just about the paycheck. It was about taking back everything they had stolen from me. Through guilt, manipulation, and threats. For years I had been the dutiful daughter, the responsible one, the fallback plan for a family that refused to take responsibility for itself. And now I had a choice. I could either let them dictate the rest of my life, or I could take control. So I opened my laptop, logged into the company's HR portal, and updated every piece of my financial information. New bank account, new routing number, everything locked under my name alone. I even spoke to a financial advisor that week, explaining my family situation in blunt detail. He didn't even look surprised. He just nodded and said, you'd be shocked how many high earners get drained by their own relatives. You need boundaries, and you need them in writing. So I set everything up, savings, retirement accounts, investments, all under protections they couldn't touch. When I got my first paycheck, I sat there staring at it, tears stinging my eyes. Not because of the money itself, but because for the first time in my life, I felt like it was really mine. Then came the confrontation. My father called me 3 days later, his tone sharp, as if he was speaking to an employee who had missed a deadline. So, where's the transfer? You know what we agreed on. My stomach knotted, but my voice came out steady. There was no agreement. I'm not giving you half my income, and I'm not paying for my brother. For a long pause, there was silence. Then his voice rose like thunder. Ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. We raised you. We fed you. And now you think you're too good for your own family. I held the phone to my ear and said the words I had been terrified to speak my entire life. You raised me so you could use me, and I'm done being used. He roared, cursing, demanding, threatening to cut me off from the family. And for the first time, the threat didn't scare me. It relieved me. I realized being cut off was exactly what I needed to finally breathe. My brother texted later, mocking me, saying I was selfish, saying I'd regret it when I was alone, but I didn't respond. I deleted the message, blocked his number, and sat in silence, listening to the hum of the city outside my window. And, in that silence, I felt lighter than I ever had. It wasn't just about refusing to give them money. It was about reclaiming my freedom. For the first time, I wasn't their safety net, their bank, their scapegoat. I was me, and no one was going to take that from me again. Weeks passed, and the fallout from my refusal unfolded exactly how I knew it would. My father launched a smear campaign against me through extended relatives, calling me cold-hearted, ungrateful, arrogant now that I thought I was rich. Aunts and uncles I barely spoke to suddenly reached out, lecturing me about duty and family, parroting his words as if they had been rehearsed. I didn't bother defending myself. I let their calls go unanswered, their messages ignored. My mother tried once, timidly, to convince me to compromise, saying, maybe just give a little each month to keep the peace. But I told her calmly that peace bought with extortion isn't peace at all. She cried softly, but even her tears felt manipulative, like another attempt to guilt me into submission. My brother, meanwhile, doubled down. He sent me a screenshot of a luxury car, captioned, "This one's mine when you finally pay up." I didn't even waste the energy to reply. At work, I threw myself into projects with a focus and energy that surprised even me. Without the constant weight of their demands, I flourished. My boss pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "You're already performing like a senior consultant. Keep this up, and we'll be talking promotions sooner than you think." That night, walking home past glowing city lights, I realized something monumental. Success felt entirely different when it wasn't tethered to their expectations. It was clean, untainted, mine. But my father wasn't done. A month later, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there, arms crossed, face red with fury. "You think you can just cut us out after everything?" he barked, shoving past me into my living room. He ranted about betrayal, about how I was abandoning the family, about how he deserved repayment for raising me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink under his voice. I let him rage. Then I stood tall and said, "You raised me to be a tool for you, but I'm not your tool. I don't owe you my life." He went silent, his face twisting with shock, because he had never heard me speak to him like that before. When he realized I wasn't budging, he spat on the floor, muttered that I was dead to him, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frame. I stood there in the echo of the slam, heart racing, but instead of fear, I felt power. The kind of power that comes when you finally break a chain that's been around your neck for decades. From that day forward, I knew the war was over. They could scream, smear, threaten all they wanted, but my boundaries were set in stone. I wasn't their bank. I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't their prisoner. I was free. Months went by, and the silence from my family became the loudest sound in my life. Holidays came and went, and while old traditions used to mean cramming into my parents' house with fake smiles and forced laughter, this time I booked myself a solo trip to Italy. I walked cobblestone streets, drank espresso in tiny cafes, and stood on balconies overlooking cities I had only dreamed of while working night shifts through grad school. For the first time, there was no call demanding, "Send money before you go." No one asking, "What are you bringing us back?" Every cent I spent was mine, and I savored that freedom like oxygen. Back at work, my career skyrocketed. Projects closed, clients requested me by name, and within a year I was promoted. My salary climbing even higher. I invested smartly, took financial literacy courses, and built a cushion that would protect me no matter what storm came. My father tried, reaching out once through a cousin, demanding that I fix what I broke. I sent back a 2-sentence email. "I didn't break the family. You broke it the day you tried to own me." And then I blocked every channel again. The rumors about me spread. Apparently, I was selfish, heartless, corrupted by money, but the people who actually knew me, the friends I chose, the mentors I trusted, saw the truth. They saw someone who had fought to escape chains, disguised as love. And slowly, I rebuilt my circle. No more relatives draining me, no more guilt trips. Just people who wanted me for me. My brother eventually reached out too, not with an apology, but with a plea. He had racked up debt, lost another job, and wanted me to help, just this once. I stared at the message for a long time, remembering every smirk, every entitled demand, every time he sat back while I broke myself to hold the family together, and then I deleted it. No explanation, no answer, because my silence was the answer. The old me would have felt guilty, but the new me, I felt nothing but peace. My revenge wasn't about shouting or exposing them or dragging them down. It was about living a life they could never touch. My father wanted 50%. My brother wanted 30%. And in the end, they got nothing. And I got everything. Freedom, success, and a future that belonged solely to me. Years later, when I looked back, I realized that moment at the kitchen table had been the breaking point my entire life was building toward. My father had thought he was issuing a command, but what he really did was hand me the clarity to walk away for good. The distance I put between myself and them turned into the foundation of a life I could finally design on my own terms. I bought my first home without needing anyone's approval, a sleek apartment with wide windows and a view of the skyline that glowed like possibility every night. I built friendships that felt like family, friends who celebrated my wins without resentment, who showed up not because they wanted something, but because they cared. I even met someone, slowly allowing myself to trust love again, and what made it real was that he never once asked me for anything but my time and my honesty. Meanwhile, word trickled back to me through distant relatives. My brother had fallen deeper into debt, bouncing from one failed business scheme to another, always blaming me for his failures. My father grew bitter, angrier, telling anyone who would listen that his daughter had abandoned him. But I knew the truth. He hadn't lost me. He had thrown me away the moment he put a price tag on my loyalty. The irony was sharp. They could have had me in their lives if they'd only treated me with love instead of greed. Instead, they ended up with nothing, and I ended up with peace. I learned that sometimes revenge doesn't come with fireworks or courtroom showdowns. Sometimes the greatest revenge is quietly living well, refusing to be broken, refusing to hand over the life you bled for. I built mine stronger than they ever imagined. And when I stood on the balcony of my apartment, one evening, the city alive beneath me, I thought back to my father's words. If you want to stay in this family, that's the deal. And I whispered to myself, smiling, no deal. Time created distance. But distance didn't erase the attempts to drag me back in. About 6 months after my father stormed out of my apartment, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name in his heavy handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an invoice, listing what he claimed he had spent raising me. Groceries, school clothes, household expenses. At the bottom, a total, $438,015, and a line scrawled in red ink. You will pay this back. We invested in you. Now return the investment. I remember laughing out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurdly predictable. He had turned my entire childhood into a bill, as if the basic responsibilities of parenting was some kind of loan I owed interest on. That night, I sat with the paper in my lap and thought about the little girl I once was, the one who used to do extra chores just to earn his approval, who thought love was something you had to pay for. I felt a swell of grief for her, but also a surge of power for the woman I had become. I ripped the paper into pieces and threw it in the trash. No response, no explanation, just silence. Because silence was the only language they couldn't twist against me. But my father didn't stop there. He showed up at my office one afternoon, uninvited, striding into the lobby in his work jacket like he still owned me. My receptionist buzzed me in a panic, whispering, "There's a man downstairs demanding to see you. He says he's your father." My heart slammed in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe, to remember I wasn't a scared child anymore. I went down, heels clicking on the marble floor, and there he was, red-faced, fist clenched, his voice already rising. "So, this is where all my money went. You think you're too important to pick up a phone. You think you can hide behind glass towers and suits." Heads turned, phones lifted, people recording. I kept my voice level and said, "You need to leave. You don't belong here." He laughed bitterly, loud enough for the whole lobby to hear. "Don't belong. I made you. Everything you are is because of me. You think this is your money. It's mine. It always was." The security guard stepped closer, ready to escort him out, but I raised a hand. I wanted him to hear it, once, loud and clear. "No, everything I am is despite you. And this money, this life, it's mine, not yours. Never yours." His face twisted, caught between rage and humiliation. As strangers filmed him unraveling in public, security walked him out while he cursed and shouted, and I stood there, shoulders squared, knowing the entire power dynamic had shifted forever. He couldn't intimidate me in private anymore. The world had seen him, not me, for what he really was. And deep down, I knew he would never forgive me for taking away the one weapon he had always relied on, fear. After that scene in the lobby, my father doubled down in ways I should have expected, but still left me stunned. He started calling my company directly, leaving voicemails for HR, claiming I was embezzling family funds. He wrote long rants on Facebook, tagging distant cousins, saying I had abandoned my blood and chosen greed over love. Old family, friends reached out with confused messages. "What's going on? Your dad says you stole from him." I kept my answers short, professional. "None of it is true. Please don't involve yourself." But every time another message popped up, the knot in my stomach reminded me just how far he would go to destroy me when he couldn't control me. My brother joined in too, of course, parroting the same story online, posting pictures of himself, looking pitiful, saying his selfish sister left him to starve while she lived in luxury. The truth was, he still lived at home, bills covered by my parents, but the narrative of victimhood suited him too well to abandon. At work, I decided to preempt the damage. I scheduled a meeting with HR, laid everything out, my father's harassment, his attempts to smear me, even the fake invoice he had mailed. I brought receipts, screenshots, emails, the paper itself. I expected skepticism, maybe even judgment, but instead, the HR manager looked at me with quiet sympathy and said, "You're not the first. Family can be the hardest boundaries to set. We'll protect you here." They put blocks on incoming calls from his number, alerted security, and reminded me that my work spoke for itself. That support gave me back some oxygen, but the storm at home worsened. One Sunday, while I was out grocery shopping, I returned to find an envelope taped to my door, another demand letter, this time scribbled by my brother. He claimed I owed him 30% of my salary, citing Dad's orders, as if his laziness was a binding contract. The arrogance of it made my hands shake with rage. I pictured him lying on the couch at home, video game controller in hand, writing this nonsense while waiting for me to bankroll his life. That night, instead of crying like the old me would have, I opened my laptop, researched restraining orders, and called a lawyer. The consultation was eye-opening. Harassment wasn't just strangers on the street. It could be family too. And I had more than enough evidence to prove it. The lawyer said, "You don't have to tolerate this. They've crossed into intimidation, and the law can back you up." For the first time, I considered it seriously. Taking legal action against my own blood. The thought made my chest tight, but also free, because if I did this, it would mean I had finally, fully stopped being their captive. The next week, I filed the paperwork. Served notices were delivered to my parents' house, warning them to stop contacting me or face consequences. My brother blasted me online again, calling me heartless, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I took screenshots, sent them straight to my lawyer, and slept soundly that night for the first time in months. For years, fear had been their currency, but now I had my own, and it was called documentation. The restraining order changed the temperature of everything. For the first time, there was a legal wall between me and their chaos, and they hated it. My father sent one last email before the block fully locked him out. "You can't erase blood. The court can't make me stop being your father. One day, you'll crawl back." I read it once, calmly forwarded it to my lawyer, and never opened another message. My brother tried a different tactic, messaging my co-workers on LinkedIn, spinning the story that I had abandoned him and ruined the family. One colleague discreetly pulled me aside and said, "Hey, we've been getting weird messages from someone claiming to be your brother. Don't worry, we know it's nonsense." I thanked them, but inside, I burned. It was one thing to attack me privately, but now they were trying to poison the world I had built with my own hands. Still, I realized something important. The more they shouted, the clearer the truth became to everyone else. They weren't exposing me, they were exposing themselves. Around this time, my mother appeared at my door. She hadn't been part of the public drama, not openly, but she showed up with a bag of food, like she used to when I was in college. For a moment, my heart wavered. I wanted to believe maybe she had come to apologize, to see me not as a wallet, but as her daughter. But as soon as she sat down, the script revealed itself. "Your father is very hurt," she said softly, clutching my hands. "He only wants respect. Couldn't you just send something each month? Not half, not even 30%. Just something to show you care." I pulled my hands back, the weight of disappointment hitting me harder than my father's rage ever did. Because with her, I had always hoped, and now I saw the truth. She wasn't neutral. She was an accomplice. Her tears, her quiet sighs, her, "Please keep the peace." All of it was just another version of control. "Mom," I said firmly, "if the only proof I love you is money, then we don't have a relationship. We have a transaction." Her face crumpled, and for a second, I almost broke. But then I remembered the years of silence, of looking away, of letting Dad and my brother drain me while she stirred her tea. She left that night without hugging me, muttering, "You'll regret this," but I didn't regret it. I woke up the next morning feeling sharper, clearer, more certain than ever. My family had shown me their truth in every possible way. Entitlement, threats, manipulation, guilt, and now I was showing them mine. A truth where their demands meant nothing. A truth where their voices were background noise, not marching orders. A truth where my money, my time, my future belonged only to me. And the more they fought to drag me back, the more determined I became never to step into that cage again. It didn't stop at smear campaigns or doorstep visits. my father escalated into something darker, something that showed me he wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous. One afternoon, I received a notice from my bank about suspicious inquiries into my accounts. At first, I thought it was fraud from strangers. But when the investigator explained that someone had called pretending to be me, providing partial information, like my date of birth and old addresses, my blood ran cold. Only my family knew those details. They were trying to get into my finances directly, as if breaking into my life was their right. The bank locked everything down tighter, flagged my accounts, and gave me direct access to their fraud team. I was hung up shaking, but also furious. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was attempted theft. I called my lawyer, who told me flatly, "Document it all. We'll add it to the case. If they keep this up, we can push for criminal charges." Meanwhile, my brother posted a long rant on social media about how I had stolen the family fortune. He claimed I had promised to share my salary, that I was hoarding money while they suffered. Old classmates reached out, confused, asking if it was true. Instead of defending myself, I sent them screenshots of his demands, the fake invoice, the restraining order. One by one, people stopped believing his story. His public tantrum became a mirror that only reflected his own laziness and greed. Still, the betrayal stung, my own blood trying to paint me as a thief for refusing to let them rob me. At work, I kept rising. I led a major project that brought in millions for the firm, and during the celebration dinner, as colleagues toasted me, I realized something profound. My family had always promised me belonging if I obeyed, but here, among people who respected my work and effort, I felt belonging without condition, and it was sweeter than any forced loyalty at home ever had been. Then the final straw. My father attempted to serve me with a legal notice, a flimsy self-written claim that I was indebted to him for raising costs, complete with his laughable ledger of expenses. My lawyer smirked as he read it, saying, "This won't survive 5 minutes in court, but if he files it, it's harassment, and harassment has consequences." That's when the tables truly turned. My father thought he was intimidating me, but in reality, he was handing me the rope that would legally hang his credibility. And as I signed the paperwork to escalate the restraining order into a formal, legal complaint, I realized something. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was building a wall so high, so solid, that they could never climb it again. Every time they attacked, I didn't crumble. I built higher. Every attempt to drain me became another stone in the fortress of my independence. And the woman who once trembled at their words now stood untouchable, stronger than any of them could have imagined. The case my father tried to push forward collapsed almost instantly, but the damage to his reputation lingered in a way he hadn't expected. The judge dismissed his claim in less than 5 minutes, calling it nonsensical and unsupported by law. My lawyer and I walked out of the courthouse together, her heels clicking against the marble as she said, "He thought this would intimidate you, but now it's on record. Every judge in this district will see him for what he is if he ever tries again." That hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. He wasn't just losing his grip on me, he was losing credibility in every system he tried to weaponize. He had trained me to believe he was untouchable, that his authority was unquestionable. But here he was, just another bitter man, being told no by people he couldn't scare. Back home, I poured myself a glass of wine and replayed it all in my head. The kitchen table demand, the fake invoices, the screaming in my office lobby, the endless smear campaigns. Every step he took to break me had backfired. And yet, part of me still grieved. Not for him, not for my brother, but for the version of me that once believed family meant safety. That illusion had died slowly, painfully, but it was gone now, replaced by a truth both sharper and stronger. Family without respect is just a cage. Still, they didn't disappear. My brother messaged me from burner accounts, sometimes begging, sometimes threatening, sometimes trying to guilt me with lines like, "One day you'll be rich and lonely. What good is money then?" I ignored every single one, documenting them carefully, forwarding them to my lawyer. My father grew quieter after the court humiliation, but silence from him was never peace. It was plotting. I braced myself, knowing he would try again, and then he did, but not in the way I expected. He reached out to relatives overseas, spinning a story that I had abandoned my culture and turned American. They began flooding my inbox with messages about shame, about duty, about how I was disgracing generations. At first, it rattled me. The idea of cousins and distant family whispering my name like it was dirt. But then I remembered. None of them had been there when I worked myself sick through grad school. None of them had lifted me up when I cried from exhaustion. None of them had earned a cent of my success. Their judgment meant nothing compared to the freedom I now lived every single day. The irony was bitter but satisfying. The harder they tried to make me feel small, the bigger my life became. I was traveling the world, building wealth, creating relationships based on respect, not extraction. And every headline in my story was mine to write, not theirs. They thought they were punishing me with isolation, but in truth, they had set me free. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that hums like static, charged with something waiting to strike. My father's humiliation in court had clipped his power, but it hadn't killed his obsession. A few weeks later, I received a call from my old university's financial aid office. The woman on the line hesitated, then asked if I had authorized a request to access my scholarship records. I hadn't. She explained that someone posing as a family member had insisted they needed proof of how much aid I'd received, because the family had invested heavily in me. My chest tightened. It was him again, desperate to build some kind of false trail, trying to rewrite history into numbers he could claim. I thanked her, flagged the attempt, and added another entry to the thick binder of evidence I now kept. A binder that grew fatter every month with every screenshot, every letter, every failed attack. But here's the thing about people like him. When one weapon stops working, they sharpen another. My brothers started contacting mutual acquaintances from childhood, even people I hadn't spoken to in a decade, feeding them stories that I was unstable, that I was drunk on money, that I had lost my values. One former neighbor messaged me, "Your brother told us you were in rehab. Is that true?" I sat there staring at the screen, realizing just how far they were willing to go. Lies weren't just tools anymore. They were artillery. And yet, each new smear lost its sting. Because with every attack, I noticed something shifting in me. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't shaking or second-guessing myself the way I used to. Instead, I looked at their tactics like items on a checklist. Attempted financial fraud, documented, harassment online, screenshotted, false rumors, archived. My fear had transformed into discipline, and that discipline became power. At the same time, my new life was solidifying. I had joined a mentorship program for young women in business, teaching them about boundaries, money, and self-worth, the exact things I had been denied. I watched their eyes widen when I told them, the first no you give your family will feel like breaking a bone, but the second will feel like setting it. In helping them, I healed myself. One evening after hosting a workshop, I walked home under the city lights and realized something profound. I was no longer reacting to my family's attacks. I was building something beyond them, something they could never touch. Their world was small, locked in entitlement and lies. Mine was wide open, stretching ahead with opportunity and freedom. And that's when I finally understood. They weren't chasing me because I owed them anything. They were chasing me because without me, they had nothing. And that truth was the sharpest revenge of all. The final strike came not with shouting or lawsuits, but with a whimper that told me the war was over. After months of silence, I received one last message, not from my father or brother, but from a distant cousin. It was a photo of my parents' house, paint peeling, lawn overgrown, cars gone from the driveway. The caption read, "They say you abandoned them. They say it's your fault." I stared at it for a long moment, and then I closed my phone, because it wasn't my fault. It never had been. They had chosen entitlement over love, control over connection, and now they were living with the consequences. Meanwhile, my life had never been fuller. I had purchased a home of my own, modern, bright, filled with books and plants and laughter from friends who came not to take but to share. I traveled freely, worked on projects that challenged me, and stood tall in rooms I once thought I'd never belong in. My money was mine, but more importantly, my peace was mine. And peace was something no one could put a price tag on. I thought back often to that night at the kitchen table, my father tapping his hand, like a judge declaring a sentence. 50% for us, 30% for your brother, no excuses. And I realized how close I had come to giving in, how easily I could have handed over my freedom in the name of family. But I hadn't. I had chosen myself. And in choosing myself, I discovered that the greatest revenge wasn't cutting them down. It was rising so high, they could never touch me. Today, when people ask about my family, I smile softly and say, they taught me everything I needed to know by showing me what love is not. And then I close the subject, because my story isn't about them anymore. It's about me and the life I built without their chains. Family had tried to make me believe I was born to serve them, but in the end, I became the woman who served no one's greed, only her own future. And that is a victory richer than $500,000 could ever buy. So I'll leave you with this. When someone tells you that love means sacrifice, without end, remember me. Remember the girl who said, no deal, and walked away, and ask yourself, what would your freedom be worth?